Hi. You need to know more about the current state of international affairs to help you decode some of the messaging you'll be seeing in the news over the coming years. I'm Wayne, and I'd like to share some thoughts and opinions with you. As you know, conflict between the West and China is said to be on the horizon. Just a few days ago, Xi Jinping told the Chinese armed forces to be ready for war by 2027. If you have ever studied how modern China does international affairs, that comment sticks out. It is obviously out of character for a player who can afford more patience than anywhere in the free election cycle world. And this is critical. Unlike the West, China's government is not constrained or pressured by a 4 or 8 year election cycle. Though they are flexible in how they define defensive action, China doesn't really do large-scale offensive action. For the past 50 years, they've been able to catch more flies with honey than they could ever hope to catch with cordite. And the way they do this is far more profitable than by warfare. Generally, they use economic pressures and follow-on incentives to steer their neighbors into business and lending engagements that serve China's goals. It works like this. China builds infrastructure for you on favorable lending terms. Your citizens see a moderate increase to their quality of life and purchasing power, and with those gains you pay back your loans over the years. Until you can't, then you have to go asking what else you can do for China to resolve your non-payment issue. Anyway, that's the China we're working with. 2023's China is not 1983's USSR. What worked with 1983's USSR will not work with China at all. So what did work with 1983's USSR, you ask? The saber rattling, being publicly mean and reminding them constantly that the West could destroy them. It kept USSR up against a wall, always having to be ready to defend against that destruction, to the point where quality of life suffered and the economy experienced hard braking. USSR had fewer people and less industrial exploitation of internal resources than USA, but kept up military spending at par or better with USA until 1998, at least partly due to these pressures. As evidence of dilated people's fame, wrapped. If more than half the budget goes to military spending, less than half goes to whatever it's defending. As this brings what you thought was a digression to a close, I ask you to survey China's most potentially combat-capable neighbors with me. Number 1. To the immediate east in the South China Sea sits Taiwan. Taiwan is entrenched in partnerships with the West, and is still officially in an unsettled dispute over the governance of both Taiwan and mainland China. They were once both part of the same country. Ever since their breakup, Taiwan has maintained a powerful self-defense force. Taiwan matters to China because China claims it but doesn't get to tax it or govern it. And Taiwan matters to the West because that's where the whole world gets the bulk of its most advanced semiconductors. Semiconductor fabrication facilities are not easy to build. They do not go into production quickly, and they are extremely expensive and training-intensive to spin up. China does not have this capacity domestically. So Taiwan is the first place you would expect a war with China to turn hot. But China doesn't want to drop bombs on Taiwan in order to get it. It wants the economic value of a properly operational Taiwan. Blowing up Taiwan, to China, is burning your own defense money only to watch the prize itself also burn up. And a country run by a private corporation absolutely won't have that. Number 2. To the Far East, USA has again increased military spending. They are always sharpening their trillion-dollar saber, always maintaining their 750 bases in 80 countries, and always taking out their huge fleets for regular, extremely expensive practice sorties. USA may be 6,000 miles across an ocean from China, but when you're USA, nowhere is far away, because you're always prepared to bring the full force of the fight to the enemy's shores rather than letting it come to your own. USA, and their allies, need freedom of navigation throughout the South China Sea and freedom of access to Taiwan, because today's USA can't build sufficiently advanced semiconductors in the necessary volumes at home, and they almost certainly can't develop this capacity by 2027. Number 3. To the northeast, Japan has decided to double its military spending. Today's modern world does not remember this, but Japan is incredibly capable in combat situations. A Japan that has the same size self-defense force as today, but with an equally capable offensive force, is a potent combatant nobody wants to face. But how many years does it take to get this new force ready? Number 4. To the north, Russia is a geographically enormous, currently insane liability worth little to no money today and with no value whatsoever to add to its relationship with China today. Nevertheless, China is sustaining a very public, do-nothing, friendship with Russia, not to help out with the war in Ukraine, but to reach out a hand in the future, offering favorable lending terms to help Russia rebuild. Yes, that's right. In its current relationship with Russia, China need only smile and sit still, because after enough time goes by, Russia will fall into the open arms of a waiting China, becoming its vassal state. It's strategic genius. Just smile and sit still. Xi's call for war by 2027 was genius tactical work. As I said, it was already being discussed in the open intel community. 11 saying it out loud doesn't add any information to the discussion, but it does seem to be steering huge and powerful nations into overextending themselves on new military capabilities. Here's how it has impacted world steering in just 1 week. Firstly, Japan is overspending on military bulk. Its spending will probably be inefficiently executed because they are in a hurry. Secondly, USA is going to disrupt its own markets, hustling to build up domestic semiconductor manufacturing capabilities at great expense and in a rush. Thirdly, and finally, Taiwan is assisting USA in ramping up US domestic semiconductor fabrication efforts. These efforts are slated to end in American semiconductor independence by 2030. This plays into China's patient hands perfectly. China knows a Taiwan unessential to the prosperity of the West will be far less well defended by the international community. A future Taiwan, knowing its Western allies no longer desperately need to defend it, will be far more likely to accept a non-violent annexation by China. Imagine what happens when countries like USA and Japan have nowhere else to go for favorable lending terms. That's the war objective China is currently fighting for. Everything China does internationally is motivated by one singular strategy: get into those markets and become indispensable there. Then you shall rule them all.